So I'm sure you guys have a lot of free time on your hands right now, right? So with this in mind, I kind of wanted to go ahead and restart a monthly video series I had going titled Free-to-Play MMORPGs That You Should Play in X Month. In each video, I would compile a list of 10 free MMOs, completely different MMOs from each previous video for you guys to take a look at. Now, I want to go ahead and do the same thing this year. I have a channel with almost 250,000 subscribers, and I feel like I should be bringing attention to as many different games as I can. That way, you might find something that you really enjoy that you might not have otherwise. This is especially important right now with so many people at home looking for something to do. Each list is going to have 2 larger MMOs along with 8 smaller, more obscure games. So note that while your favorite game might not be included in this month's list specifically, that doesn't mean it won't be included in next month's. Now, let's take a few minutes to not only spread some love around the community, but also some activity around the genre a little bit too, yeah? While Phantasy Star Online 2 is currently only available on the Xbox console, the game is slated for a release in the near future on PCs, with other platforms coming over time. PSO2 was originally released back in Japan in 2012, with us finally getting the game this year. Yet even after all this time, it has remained one of the most anticipated MMOs year after year. The game is a beautiful anime MMO that takes place in a large social quest hub where you take missions with other players and tackle fights ranging from small-scale encounters you can complete on your own to large-scale encounters you need several groups for. Despite when it was released, the action combat the game employs is better than most combat styles released even in this day and age. You have the option of equipping various different weapon types and swapping between them on the fly. This allows you to fill different roles at any given time and provides players a lot of individual utility. While the game is mostly instanced content, there's so much to do and so much to explore that you don't really feel it, especially considering you can find other players randomly around instances at times. Like, honestly, the first time this happened to me, I freaked out a little bit. Like, I had no idea that other players could join your instance at that moment. And this other guy, like, I was just like standing around fighting monsters, and this other dude, I thought he was like an NPC or an enemy, but he's just like running around, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, oh hey, there are NPCs around here. And then he walks right up to me and he's like, hey. I was just like, oh, you're a player. Oh my god. Wow. Okay, cool. Riders of Icarus was released back in 2016 and was published by Nexon for the first few years of its life before being transferred to Velof, I think is how you go ahead and pronounce that, who have been in charge of publishing the game ever since. Now, even after 4 years of being online, it remains one of the only MMOs that provide players with an extensive selection of monsters to both do battle with and capture. There are a couple of other monster collecting MMOs out there, but none really do it nearly as well as Riders of Icarus does. The one issue with the game was that it was published by Nexon, which has since been remedied. It's a beautiful 3D game that takes place in a large open world with segregated zones akin to Blade and Soul or Final Fantasy XIV. There is just so much to explore and so many different creatures to capture that you almost never run out of things to do. The combat is a hybrid of action and tab target, requiring a target for single target abilities, but allowing for AoEs to be used anywhere at any time with no target necessary. Riders of Icarus is a pretty traditional MMO. It kind of reminds me of what Ascent Infinite Realm is trying to be, but kind of like at an earlier stage in its life. Much like Riders of Icarus, Tree of Savior was released back in 2016. At the beginning of 2019, it underwent a complete overhaul of all of its systems and rebranded to Tree of Savior Rebuild. Tree of Savior is one of the few MMOs of its kind. It's heavily inspired by Ragnarok Online and features more classes than you would ever know what to do with. It features very fluid action combat, allowing for you to unleash spectacularly destructive abilities that look like they really should not be in a game of this kind. It is a beautiful mixture between anime and 2D sprites with painted backgrounds. It truly looks nothing like I've ever seen before. Seriously, if you were to try this game purely off of how it looks, I would not blame you. Now, like Riders of Icarus, the game also utilizes segregated zones, but each zone has the potential to hold a plethora of players all at once. The player base is just very low, and due to that, you don't really see anyone while leveling. Guild Wars 2 released back in 2012 as a buy-to-play MMO. After 3 years and over 5 million copies sold, ArenaNet decided to make the game free to play, increasing the player base exponentially. Guild Wars 2 is probably one of the better looking free-to-play MMOs on the market, with a fully 3D world that is ridiculously large, even if it utilizes segregated zones as well. I mean, like, I'm not saying that segregated zones are bad. Some of my favorite MMOs actually use segregated zones. I just kind of feel like more MMOs these days use segregated zones as opposed to having something like an open world or a sandbox world. But Guild Wars 2 definitely pulls it off, and it makes it feel almost seamless. Combat in Guild Wars 2 is also pretty unique. A target is technically necessary for some skills, but at the same time, it is in no way tap target, considering most classes are capable of using attacks and skills without a target. Make of that what you will. If anything, I would go as far as saying it's pretty much an action combat system though. There's just so much to do in this game, and with an expansion on the horizon, it is safe to say that Guild Wars 2 might be something you want to make your way through in preparation for the next large set of content. Now, I go back to Vindictus periodically because it's just so damn good. It looks as good as it plays as well, and considering the game was released all the way back in 2010, you honestly wouldn't think it. Vindictus is a hub-based dungeon crawler similar to PSO2, but much more focused on the dungeon aspect of the genre. You have a town that you occupy, tons of players to run around and play with, a plethora of NPCs to take quests off of, and well, that is pretty much it. But I mean, the action combat that is present in game is just so much better than the vast majority of games that are still released like a decade after Vindictus was. And graphically, honestly, I am going to have to do an updated video on Vindictus purely so I can show you all how incredible the characters look, especially the newly added ones. And with interactable environments and weapons to find in dungeons, man, seriously, this is one of the best action MMOs I have ever played, hands down. And if you're a fan of hub-based dungeon running, then this is going to be right up your guys' alley. Revelation Online was released back in 2015. This is one of the few MMORPGs that have a completely open world without loading screens separating areas. The game is absolutely beautiful. Back when it was released, players were often found arguing which game between Revelation and Blade & Soul was the better looking MMO. They both have similar graphical styles and are both a little anime inspired, featuring noticeably exaggerated body proportions on their characters. Combat is targeted lock-on, meaning that while you can tactically use some AoEs without a target, the majority of the game, even with their action mode, from what I believe, was not in any way traditional action combat. Honestly though, with the exception of the game being a large grind, it's a fairly solid traditional MMO. I played it at launch for a while and I enjoyed my time in it, and with the updates it continues to get even 5 years later. It's refreshing to see that My.Games have not given up on it. Mabinogi was released back in 2004. Honestly, this is probably the oldest MMO included in this list, yet even so, the game has continued to remain one of the most unique MMOs to have ever released. The game is anime inspired, it utilizes beautiful cel-shaded graphics, which is something that definitely isn't very common in the MMO scene, and is generally referred to as the social MMO. While the game utilizes segregated zones, there is so much to do in game that traversing the zones, exploring, and heck, even the combat are mostly an afterthought. Mabinogi provides you just so much freedom to play the game how you want, it's unreal. Speaking of the combat though, interestingly, the game makes use of kind of like a rock, paper, scissors mechanic, while the combat itself is tab target. The combat definitely shows its age and is probably the only issue I have with the game. Otherwise, it's by far one of the most interesting MMOs I've ever played. I've never played a game like Mabinogi, and with Pyria Chronicles cancelled, I probably never will. So I am a huge Digimon fan. I mean, like, I love Pokemon, but the very first Digimon World game is one of my favorite games of all time. Digimon Masters Online is an MMO set within the Digimon world and was released back in 2009. I haven't played through it nearly as extensively as I probably should have, honestly, but from what I have played, I can definitely say that I have enjoyed it. It's a very solid, very traditional MMO. I mean, like, it's nothing new, it's nothing innovative, but come on, it's Digimon with hundreds of players. Obviously, since it's a Digimon MMO, MMO, it is going to be anime inspired. The Digimon are all rendered very well, and everything kinda looks like out of a PS3 Digimon game, which for an MMO released back in 2009 is pretty good. Combat is tab target, yet instead of controlling your character in combat, you give your Digimon commands and watch the Digimon itself do battle, while you have the freedom to run around and do whatever you want. You can loot, you can explore, literally whatever. I never made it that far through the game, but from what I gather, the game takes you through plenty of unique zones with a large selection of Digimon to capture and train. Now, if you ever wanted to play a Digimon game with other people, this right here, this is it. Atlantica Online was released back in 2008 and provides one of the most interesting experiences I have ever had in an MMO. See, traditionally, you create your own character, you get yourself in game, you start leveling, you begin killing monsters or enemies, advancing yourself and your character. However, Atlantica took a slightly different approach. See, first and foremost, instead of one single character, you have an entire party of characters. I forget how many specifically, somewhere like around 9, I think. You field a number of characters, all of which you can recruit over the course of the game as you continue to level, as you continue to unlock new content. Each character you recruit can be leveled individually and have their own unique selection of gear equipped. This means that you're required to actively grind gear for your entire team, but it also provides an opportunity to craft a team to use against different bosses, dungeons, and even other players that is completely your own. The combat is turn-based, which is probably the only time I've ever seen that used in an MMO. The game otherwise is pretty traditional. Soul Worker was released back in 2016. Yeah, this is definitely a more recent title. When Soul Worker came out, I dedicated so much time to the game, working my way to level 40 something. Unfortunately, Gameforge ruined the leveling experience at the same time and thus I quit, but it remains one of my favorite anime MMOs to date. Not only is it still one of the best looking anime MMOs on the market, but it also has incredibly fluid combat, providing you the ability to combo lots of different skills with pretty damn flashy effects. The only drawback is the fact that it's a hub-based instanced MMO, providing you various instances to run and various towns to explore, but other than that, there really isn't much in the way of MMO-esque content. This is probably still one of, if not my favorite anime MMO currently available right now. You know, at least until Blue Protocol launches. And even though I'm, like highly anticipating Genshin Impact, it still isn't really an MMO. And yeah, there we pretty much have it. 10 free-to-play MMORPGs that I think you guys should definitely take a look at currently in April or the end of March, beginning of April, especially if you're looking for something to do, something to play with all that spare time you're no doubt going to have. But that's just my opinion, my impressions of the genre right now. What do you guys think though? Let me know down in the comments below and let's talk about it. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this and I'll see you all next time. Peace.